My billionaire father-in-law called me a gold digger at dinner. My 6-year-old's response silenced the whole table. When wealth meets worth. The clinking of crystal glasses and hushed conversations filled the private dining room of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. I sat across from my father-in-law, Richard Montgomery, a man whose net worth had more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. His cold blue eyes had judged me from the moment his daughter brought me home 5 years ago. Tonight, surrounded by his wealthy friends and family, he would finally say what he'd been thinking all along. But he hadn't counted on one thing: the pure, unfiltered honesty of a 6-year-old child who saw the world more clearly than any of us. What happened next would not only change our family dynamics forever, but also teach everyone at that table a lesson about what truly matters in life. Sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the smallest voices, and sometimes standing up for what's right means letting those voices be heard. The man I married into. I met Sarah Montgomery during my 2nd year teaching high school English in Brooklyn. She walked into the community center where I volunteered on weekends, tutoring kids who couldn't afford private lessons. She was there dropping off donations, but something made her stay. We talked for hours about books, about making a difference, about dreams that didn't involve dollar signs. It took 3 months before I learned her last name meant something. By then, I was already in love with the woman who showed up in jeans and sneakers, who laughed at my terrible jokes, and who cried during the poetry readings my students performed. When she finally took me to meet her family, the mansion in Connecticut felt like a different planet. Richard Montgomery had built his empire from a small investment firm into a multinational corporation. He was used to people wanting things from him, used to measuring worth in portfolios and assets. From our first handshake, I felt his assessment: my teacher's salary, my modest apartment, my student loans. I saw the calculation in his eyes and came up short. But Sarah didn't care about any of that. She loved that I spent my evenings grading papers and my weekends helping kids discover Shakespeare. She loved that I drove a 10-year-old sedan and knew the names of all my neighbors. When I proposed with a ring I'd saved for 8 months to buy, she said yes before I even finished asking. Her father's disapproval hung over our wedding like storm clouds, but we got married anyway. 5 years of silent judgment. The years that followed were a careful dance. Sarah worked as a nonprofit director, having chosen purpose over her trust fund. We lived within our means, raised our daughter Emma in our 2-bedroom apartment, and built a life filled with love rather than luxury. Every family gathering was an exercise in endurance. Richard never said it directly, but his meaning was clear. The expensive gifts for Emma that we could never match. The comments about practical careers and financial security. The way he'd mentioned successful businessmen he knew, men who made real money, men who could provide properly for his daughter. His wife, Margaret, was kinder but never contradicted him. Sarah's brother, James, barely acknowledged my existence. Her childhood friends from boarding school would ask what I did with thinly veiled pity. I was the teacher who'd somehow convinced their brilliant Sarah to settle. They saw my Honda in a parking lot of Mercedes and BMWs. They heard about our modest vacations while they summered in the Hamptons. But Emma changed everything. At 6 years old, she was bright, curious, and completely unimpressed by wealth. She loved our weekend trips to free museums, our sidewalk chalk art competitions, and bedtime stories more than any expensive toy her grandfather bought. She called me her best friend and meant it. In her eyes, I wasn't poor or inadequate. I was dad, and that was enough. The dinner invitation. The invitation came on embossed cardstock. Richard's 65th birthday celebration at Le Cirque. Black tie. A command performance disguised as a request. Sarah wanted to decline, but I convinced her to go. I was tired of avoiding her family, tired of feeling like I had something to prove. Besides, Emma had been excited about wearing her fancy dress. The private dining room was everything I expected. Opulent, exclusive, intimidating. 20 guests who collectively controlled more wealth than some small countries. I recognized a senator, a renowned surgeon, 2 CEOs whose companies I'd seen on the news. And me, the public school teacher in a rented tuxedo. Emma held my hand as we walked in, her enthusiasm unbothered by the obvious wealth gap. She waved at her grandfather and ran to show her grandmother her dress. Sarah squeezed my arm, a silent gesture of solidarity. We could survive one dinner. We'd done it before. The meal started pleasantly enough. Appetizers arrived on plates that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Conversation flowed around us: stock markets, political connections, vacation homes in Aspen. I smiled, nodded, and focused on cutting Emma's food into manageable pieces. This was the role I'd learned to play: present but peripheral, acceptable but not equal. The accusation. It happened during the main course. Richard stood, wine glass in hand, preparing to make a toast. I expected the usual gratitude for success, hope for continued prosperity, perhaps a mention of family. Instead, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that silenced the table. "I've spent 65 years building something meaningful," he began, his voice carrying the authority of boardrooms and corner offices. "I've learned to recognize people's true motivations. Some pursue success through hard work and ambition." His pause was deliberate, his eyes never leaving mine. "Others find shortcuts, attaching themselves to success rather than creating it." The room's temperature seemed to drop. Sarah's face went pale. I felt every eye turn toward me, measuring, judging, confirming suspicions they'd probably harbored all along. "I've watched for 5 years," Richard continued, his tone sharp with accusation. "Watched someone content to live off my daughter's trust fund, teaching part-time while she works herself exhausted, comfortable in mediocrity because he married well." He took a sip of wine, letting his words sink in. "We have a term for that in my world. We call it being a gold digger." The silence that followed was suffocating. Someone's fork clinked against china, unnaturally loud. I felt Sarah's hand grip mine under the table, trembling with anger or embarrassment or both. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. Years of subtle jabs had prepared me for something like this, though the public nature of it cut deeper than I expected. Emma's intervention. Before I could formulate a response, before Sarah could defend me, a small voice cut through the tension like a bell. "That's not true, Grandpa." Emma stood on her chair, her 6-year-old frame barely reaching the eye level of seated adults. Her voice was clear, confident, completely unbothered by the shocked faces turning toward her. In that moment, she looked exactly like her mother, determined, principled, unafraid. "Daddy doesn't use Mommy's money," she continued, her child's logic devastatingly simple. "Mommy doesn't use her money either. We live on what Daddy makes teaching and what Mommy makes helping people. I heard them talking about it." She looked directly at her grandfather with the kind of honesty only children possess. "Mommy said she has lots of money from you, but she doesn't want it because she wants to make her own way. She said that's what you taught her when she was little." The irony hung in the air, visible and undeniable. Richard's face shifted through several expressions: surprise, confusion, something that might have been recognition. "And Daddy isn't mediocre," Emma struggled with the word but pushed through. "He teaches kids who don't have much money to love reading. Yesterday, a student gave him a drawing because Daddy helped him pass a test. Daddy cried happy tears. That's not nothing." The truth unveiled. Emma wasn't finished. With the fearlessness of childhood, she continued dismantling her grandfather's assumptions with simple facts. "We don't live in a big house because we don't need one. We have everything we need. Daddy makes me breakfast every morning before school, pancakes on Saturdays. We go to the park and the library and the museum. Last week, he helped Mrs. Chen from downstairs carry her groceries, and she gave us cookies. You can't buy that stuff, Grandpa." Sarah found her voice, standing beside our daughter. "Dad, she's right. We've never used my trust fund. I don't even access it. We made that choice together to build a life based on what we earn, what we contribute, not what we inherit." He turned down money. This came from James, Sarah's brother, speaking for the first time all evening. He looked genuinely shocked. "Multiple times," Sarah confirmed, her voice steady now. "When we got engaged, when Emma was born, when we needed a bigger apartment. My husband has too much pride to take what he hasn't earned. Sometimes I wish he'd be less stubborn about it." I finally spoke, my voice calmer than I felt. "Richard, "I don't want your money. I never have. I married your daughter because she's the best person I've ever known. We chose a modest life because it's authentic. My students come from families struggling to make rent, wondering if education can change their circumstances. How could I teach them about integrity while living off inherited wealth?" The silence after. The private dining room had never been quieter. 20 of the most powerful, wealthy people in New York sat speechless, watching a family drama more compelling than any boardroom negotiation. Margaret, Richard's wife, spoke for the first time all evening, her voice soft but firm. "Richard, remember when you started your company? You refused your father's investment because you wanted to succeed on your own terms. You called it integrity." The parallel was impossible to ignore. Richard slowly sat down, his commanding presence deflating into something more human, more vulnerable. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, perhaps seeing for the first time the principled person he'd raised. "You've been living on a teacher's salary," he asked quietly, "for 5 years. "And my nonprofit income," Sarah added. "We're not poor, Dad. We're just not wealthy. There's a difference. We have enough and we have each other, and honestly, we're happy." I saw something crack in Richard's carefully constructed armor. Maybe it was Emma's unwavering faith in me. Maybe it was recognition of his own younger self in our choices. Maybe it was simply the realization that he'd been wrong. "I thought," he began, then stopped. "I assumed you were taking advantage. The modest apartment, the old car, never accepting gifts. I thought it was a strategy, some long game to seem humble while eventually claiming everything." "No, Grandpa," Emma said, climbing down from her chair and walking to him. "Daddy just loves us, that's all. He doesn't need fancy stuff to prove it." Reconciliation and recognition. What happened next surprised everyone, myself included. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, not a check, but a letter on his company's letterhead. "I had this prepared for tonight," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "A formal challenge to your prenuptial agreement, questioning whether you were fit to be part of this family." He looked at the envelope, then at Emma, then at me. I was wrong, so completely wrong. He tore the envelope in half, then quarters, letting the pieces fall to the table like leaves. "You've been teaching my grandsons and granddaughter's generation what real values look like. You've shown my daughter that happiness doesn't require a trust fund. And you just stood there and took my insult with more dignity than I've seen in most boardrooms." The apology hung in the air, imperfect but genuine. Richard extended his hand across the table, not the grip of a business deal, but an offering of respect. I took it not because the hurt disappeared instantly, but because Emma was watching. Because teaching moments extend beyond classrooms. Because sometimes accepting an apology requires more strength than holding a grudge. "I'd like to start over," Richard said. "Not as a billionaire and a teacher, but as 2 men who love the same woman and little girl. I may not understand your choices, but I should have respected them. I should have seen what Emma saw all along." Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Margaret smiled for the first time all evening. James looked at me with something that might eventually become respect. What 6-year-olds know that we forget. The dinner ended differently than it began. Conversations resumed, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. People approached me with genuine questions about my work, about my students, about building a life on purpose rather than inheritance. Richard asked Emma about her favorite books, really listening when she answered. As we prepared to leave, Richard pulled me aside once more. "I spent decades measuring people by their portfolios. My granddaughter just taught me a better metric. Thank you for being someone worthy of that kind of loyalty." The drive home was quiet, Emma asleep in her car seat, Sarah's hand in mine. We'd survived something that could have fractured our family forever. More than survived, we'd emerged with something resembling understanding, maybe even the beginning of genuine acceptance. That night, tucking Emma into bed, she asked, "Did I do okay, Daddy? I just told the truth." "You did perfectly, sweetheart. Sometimes the truth is exactly what people need to hear, even when it's uncomfortable." She smiled sleepily. "Grandpa was wrong, but he said sorry. That's what you teach us to do." And there it was, The lesson that wealth can't buy, that status can't provide. Character isn't demonstrated in grand gestures, but in daily choices. Worth isn't measured in dollar signs, but in integrity, in love, in the courage to build something authentic rather than inherited. Emma understood what took Richard 65 years to learn. That being rich in the things that matter requires no bank account at all. It requires showing up, doing right, loving hard, and teaching the next generation that they're enough exactly as they are. Sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to someone too young to know she's supposed to be intimidated. And sometimes the greatest wealth is found not in what we accumulate, but in what we choose to give. Our time, our truth, our unwavering commitment to the people we love, regardless of whether they come with trust funds attached. / 11. True wealth lies not in bank accounts, but in character, integrity, and the relationships we nurture. Children often see people more clearly than adults because they measure worth by kindness, presence, and love rather than status and money. The courage to live according to your values, even when judged by those with different metrics of success, defines real strength. And sometimes, the most profound act of wealth is choosing purpose and authenticity over inherited privilege, teaching our children that who we are matters far more than what we have.